All right, you have to see this. I can't decide whether it's a treat or an ordeal. Maybe it's a little bit of both.
Until this moment, we just got red dye number 3 out of the market, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying, listen, this is great. We have a movement towards thinking about the food chemicals. We knew that red dye number 3 was a problem in 1990 when they got rid of it in cosmetics.
So this is Dr. Andrea Love, friend of the pod. She's an immunologist and a microbiologist. And this is one of those rare moments in what was otherwise a very disciplined debate performance where she lets her real emotions come out in response to what she's hearing.
Now they're finally getting rid of it in food, right?
That's been a little controversial, so I'm curious your take on it.
You can be look, you could argue everything's controversial.
And across from her is Dr. Aly Cohen, right here, who is a triple board certified physician in rheumatology. But throughout this discussion, she references a ton of pseudoscience. And one of the big tells is she uses the term Western medicine again and again. She also references lots of studies, but usually doesn't give specifics, which is a calculated strategy because every time she does get specific, Dr. Andrea Love completely slices and dices her bad sources and faulty reasoning.
And that is the idea, is that we should be thinking about precautionary principle. And not only that, guess what? They're great swaps. They're great alternatives. That is the messaging I've always given. Here's a little bit of the problem. Here's a lot of the solution.
But the swaps are not better. They're less tested, less safe, more expensive.
You mean a lipstick with lead versus something without lead, or something without parabens is less?
That's an extreme example.
That's wildly hyperbolic.
Let's take a
people should have
example.
a choice as to what they put on their body.
Let me use an example. So
throughout this 2.5-hour debate, there's a lot of discussion of chemicals and whether or not they are dangerous. This is that whole central tenet of the so-called Make America Healthy Again regime under RFK Jr. that is making an absolute mockery out of our medical science institutions. And so here Andrea Love really unpacks one aspect of what is essentially a pseudoscientific and conspiracy theory driven moral panic.
So what ended up happening is that lobbyists and wellness influencers kind of pushed this rhetoric that parabens, which are actually an incredibly safe antimicrobial that's used to prevent contamination in both medicines and cosmetic products for 100 years, used at a tiny level because that's all you need to control mold and bacterial contamination for things that you dip into repeatedly in your humid bathroom. But because of this false rhetoric that they were linked to cancers, this caused all this fear because they relied on people in social media and media to scare them about chemicals, which is one of the harms of giving all this information without context, without appropriate education. Some companies omitted preservatives outright, and we saw a huge uptick in contamination and infections as a result, including—
Not true. That is not true that I've ever heard of.
Actual data. So I know you don't have data, but I'm a scientist,
please
so
put it
I
on
have
the
data.
website.
Yeah, no, we'll have it up. Yeah.
So you're swapping for a safer, more well-studied preservative because of public outcry and chemophobia and misinformation for a less safe, more allergenic preservative because of all of this misinformation. So you can provide information to people, and I think that's what we should be doing, but it needs to be the accurate information and factual information and not information
Well, that's in the eye of the person, the eye of the beholder.
No, it's actually not. This is based on empirical data. Empirical data is what determines objective reality. What we have instead is not objective facts and evidence-based information. It's the appeal to nature fallacy and also telling people that they shouldn't trust companies, scientists who have dedicated their career to studying chemical composition, how they interact with us, how they are excreted by our bodies. You can't make up facts. You have facts and you have opinions or anecdotes.
So I'm going to be a little mean here because I think people like Aly Cohen actually cause a lot of harm by dressing up pseudoscience in reasonable seeming medical jargon. This is a moment during the video where I feel like she knows that she's been exposed. It's all in the facial expression, the body language. It is open to interpretation, unlike scientific data, but I'm sorry, I enjoyed it.
Of the entire crop season. And so this notion that synthetic chemicals are automatically bad, that we want to reduce the exposure of them, and we're going to use some sort of arbitrary blood test to look for conventional pesticides, but we're not going to actually look at the organic pesticides that are used.